From the personal log of Guybrush Threepwood. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I can still hear the monkeys. It's hard to believe that it's only been a few years since I first washed up on the beaches of Melee Island, armed with nothing more than a goofy name and an overpowering urge to become a swashbuckling pirate. I want to be a pirate. Who could have suspected that such a humble pursuit would lead me to cross swords with the evil ghost pirate LeChuck, the slimiest slug ever to plunder the seven seas?
Yarr! Yarr!
And who could have guessed that my battles with LeChuck would introduce me to the love of my life, Melee Island's Governor Elaine Marley? Or that my efforts to win Elaine's hand would repeatedly drag me to the mystery-drenched shores of Monkey Island. That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
Little snaggle cakes.
Hey, Elaine, could you untie me?
Buenos días.
Hey everybody, it's Ron with Ron's Computer Videos. I want to thank you very much for spending a little bit of time with us here today. Got a wonderful interview. Let's get right to it. He is a programmer, a designer, and the reason why you shouldn't be afraid of a little grime, Bret Mogilefsky. Bret, how are you doing today?
I'm all right, Ron. Good to be here.
Thank you. I am a big fan of your work at LucasArts. I was showing you some of these in the pre-show. This is my original copy of Grim Fandango from many years ago. I recently reacquired a copy of Escape from Monkey Island. But
wait a minute, hold up your Grim Fandango for a second. Hold it up for a second.
Sure.
Is that the signed version? Oh, it is the one with the shiny ink on it?
It's no. This is something I bought this at retail a million years ago. I will have to get to somewhere where everybody is at and get some signatures on this guy someday.
There was one where they printed the signatures on the box. I'm not exactly sure
really?
how to hold those, but it was like this purple shiny foil ink on the front with their.
That's
signature.
really interesting.
I thought that was one. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel inadequate.
No, it's just fine. It's just more stuff to buy later, right?
Yeah.
I do have. I think that this was an exclusive for like pre-order or something back in the day. So I do still.
That's right.
Have one of these. So I will have to live vicariously through my tiny Manuel Calavera. But
it's a good prop to have.
Yeah, I think so too. But hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about your early experience with computers and what inspired you to become a programmer?
Let's see. Earliest experience with computers in the classroom was with an adventure game. I think 5th grade. Let's say the teacher rolled. No, I think it's 5th grade. The teacher rolls out a cart in front of the class. And on the cart is a Commodore PET computer, which looks like, a green screen terminal. And we spent some time playing a game called Miser, where basically the teacher loads up a text adventure game, load star, (8, 1 off the disk. And Miser was an early adventure game. It was kind of a Zork knockoff. You're outside of a house and you have to give 2-word commands, and it's all text and their descriptions. And the teacher would basically take turns and call in the class, raise your hand. What do you think we should do next? Mm-hmm. And the teacher would type in what we said and then read the result out to us. It was terrific. It was a great intro to computers for the whole class. And I was very excited because I kept solving puzzles. In any case, it was a great introduction to computers as a sort of makes them seem friendly and approachable, and how exciting and just like reading a book. And but everybody's kind of thinking of the stuff and thinking about the puzzles. And I remember like, oh, the keys under the mat, or like, oh, we can drain the swimming pool, and just the realization, the insights there. So I think some of my earliest computer interactions were around adventure games. We did have a Commodore 64, I think a little bit after that at home. My elderly grandfather in Wales was really determined. He was really into technology himself, and he was really determined that he was going to save on the time and expense of sending international letters to us by directly connecting to us with a modem and downloading his latest missive and then having us write letters back to him. And so he laboriously like bought us the whole setup and like took it out of the box and labeled everything and wrote his own guide and sent it to us. So we actually had, we were very lucky that in this box arrived this Commodore 64, and we set it up, and oh my gosh, my grandfather's patience with a 10-year-old over the phone trying to walk through like what's wrong, trying to connect a modem to a phone line and connect to another country and do a data transfer. But we actually managed to make it work. We didn't do a whole lot of writing, but we had the Commodore 64 in the house as well. So we were very lucky to have early access to a colorful and game-friendly computer around us. We'd had Atari, I think, before that, and I remember playing Ghostbusters on the Commodore 64. I remember my brother doing all the built-in basic things, and he would make the words "F you" fly around the screen and in different colors and sizes and shapes. He was very proud of that. Then he lost interest because that was how my older brother was. But I was hooked. So I took a summer class with computers, and again, I had access to the Commodore PETs in a classroom, and we were, given programming exercises and so on, and that was the start. But I just kept doing things on the side. In the summer, I was the kid who always knew what was going on with computers. I, was building my own computer in the summer from parts, and went to a Berkeley class in the summer for kids, and then afterwards ended up, the next year I was the teacher's assistant for that to help all these other kids. And
nice.
Yeah, just always had computers in my life all the way through high school, and then decided to go to college for it. So
it seems like that's a lot of people's journey, is that it's you either were somebody that was just like, I was at the right place at the right time and I had access to things, or it's like, there was a teacher or there was somebody like an educator in my life that kind of sparked that interest, or that family member that got the hardware to you. So it's great to hear that a lot of the folks that went on and made some of the things that the rest of us kind of got to enjoy kind of have a similar story.
It was just a particular time, and I think, like you said, I think access was a huge part. Actually, I think my earliest computer experience ever was being at somebody's house, and they had it was a TRS 80 something. It's like it looked like a little black plastic thing, and it had I'm starting to think of the game, Pull Left Torch. People remember it from that. But basically, very simple graphics on the screen, things like that. I think games were a huge draw to kids around that time, and
sure.
And I think it coincided with the access becoming available. So I think it got a lot of, it was the start of a lot of computer science and careers.
Oh, sure. It's you came for the games and stayed for the, I want to make my own games. I want to create. So
I could make it do something different. Yeah.
Yes. Very cool.
Or in a lot of cases, I need to hack on games because they're too expensive for me.
Yeah, that's the other part of the story too, where it's it's like that mindset where people, like, you take things apart, you want to see how they work, and a lot of those people ended up having involvement with like the cracker community and stuff, because it's just like, let's see if I can make a copy of that, just as a an educational exercise here. But
we had Wizardry on the IBM PC at my dad's house at one point, and there was a hack. I don't know how my brother learned about this stuff at the time. How did we learn about it before the internet or bullet boards? But there was a hack with Wizardry where if you flipped over your scenario disk, you could make a copy that was unprotected, and so it was possible to duplicate items between disks that were not supposed to be. They were supposed to be unique, legendary items in the game, and so you had a party of, you could usually must have one samurai. He had 6 samurais in his party, and And I just remember like the sort of lore and the sort of background, you know, how did this information get out and around? I have no idea, but it was just there. It was like, oh, I know the secret. Oh, I heard this thing. Oh, I learned about this.
Mm-hmm.
And every little thing you found that you had not known before intrigued you about like, well, what else don't I know? There must be tons of stuff out there. And there was.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about exploring, and when I was in school, we had people that were that had Prodigy accounts or whatever that would like, oh gosh, I downloaded the patch for whatever this game was, and then you come to school and everybody's trading floppies and things. So
yes, love that.
I absolutely get that. So, but it sounds like you were a gamer as a kid. What genre was your favorite genre?
I think I gravitated toward the graphic adventures pretty early. I played a lot of early ones. You know, Maniac Mansion was an early one, and Zack, McCracken, and the Alien Mindbenders. So I love those. Other text adventures, I played all the Infocom adventures pretty much. I remember, you know, there's Sorcerer. I just remember, you know, being stuck on the last puzzle for like 6 months and throwing it away in frustration, and then suddenly having inspiration one day, like, oh, maybe that would work, and then running back and turning it on and finishing the game with that one command kind of thing. So I think adventure games have always been kind of in my soul. Obviously, I did a lot of, you know, the usual sort of Atari 2600 or ColecoVision, you know, kind of games, cartridge games. We never had a television. That was the like, were you a ColecoVision house or an Intellivision house at the time? But I think I never really had like a kind of game that was attractive to me until the Infocom games and the early graphic adventures.
But I remember the very first time that I played the Infocom adventure games. I think the very first one I played was Hitchhiker's Guide, and then there were a few others that you could actually borrow through the local library.
Oh, amazing.
And so it was, there were no feelies in the box, but you could absolutely borrow the floppy disk. And but I remember playing the Lurking Horror, which also opened up a whole other love for me of Lovecraftian sort of stuff. So I just remember that being very scary.
I think the two games I first remember ever encountering on PC, my father had a PC for accounting software that had to be custom written or something. But we had Wizardry and we had Hitchhiker's Guide. And I think I played Zork and then Hitchhiker's Guide. That was the second one I played. So
yeah, they're both great games. They're a ton of fun. So, but it kind of early in your career, you were a LucasArts employee, and you did a lot of like playtesting. Did you and quality assurance, I think, is maybe kind of the broader term for all of that. So
yes,
quality assurance and playtesting, what is that job actually like? Because I think a lot of people have it in their head that it's like it's a finished product and you are basically just getting to be the first kid to play through whatever that is, when it is probably a lot more bug reports.
Yeah, games don't ship until they don't have bugs, which means conversely the games always have bugs until they ship, which means that you're playing a buggy game the entire time. I ended up being a tester at LucasArts as a summer job in high school, and it was my first real job, I think. Commuted to go there, and I was testing with LucasArts people, and we had something called the testing pit. I was in an A building, which used to house ILM. It was in San Rafael. And the testing pit was this sort of internal conference room with no windows that they just kitted out with as many stations next to each other as they possibly could to fit us in there. So it was pretty smelly, tight quarters, colorful characters. We had people who were a little older than me. I was the youngest one. I was 16, but we also had like a guy who used to be a fighter pilot in there, and he was in there testing the secret weapons of the Luftwaffe, and Battle of Britain revisions. But we were testing a lot of adventure games. I think the first thing I tested was there was something called Indiana Jones. I think it was just Indiana Jones, the arcade game or the adventure game or something like that. And I also tested, because I was one of the few people they had on staff who played Zack McCracken start to finish. I was playing a version of that for the FM Towns, which is this weird early Japanese multimedia computer way ahead of its time. But when you're playing these games, you're getting builds that are either buggy or not complete. We first got our first build of Monkey Island. We were able to play until the end of Act 1, and then the game would crash. We ran out of game. And if you know anything about Monkey Island, there's 3 acts, and there's a lot of stuff in there. And there would be temporary art, or there would be like insert crash here, or all kinds of things like that, where it's very much like first playable kind of, does this work at all? Are we making bugs as faster than we're writing code, writing content? But yeah, the job as a tester is not like, it's not like you're playing a fun game. It's usually not fun until right before it ships. The job is a job, and it can be a little soul-defying. If you think about a game you play, let's say a 40-hour game. Well, that's 1 week being on the job. So if you're still playing that game 6 months later, you've gotten sick of whatever amount of game is there, and you know it inside out. Sure. And so you come up with new ways to stay interested and entertained and focused. So the game became finding bugs, right? The game wasn't the game. The game was, how can I make this game crash? Or I bet the programmers didn't think of this. Or I'll be the first one to ever think of doing it this way. What if I didn't go the way that the designer expected me to go? And so there was a creativity there, which is a shocking thing. People don't think of that when they think about testing, but the tester's mindset, and I think this goes hand in hand, as we were saying, with the sort of hacker's mindset of sort of like, well, what if I do the unexpected thing, or how does this work? How can I poke it where this might be weak, and kind of fray the edges of this little reality, right? So that was really a lot of the bug finding was, you had, the easy bugs were already found. They were logged in the database. You could see them, and you get all these bugs, you write out as you're playing. And then at the end of the day, you kind of go over to the one machine that had the bug database in it, and you're looking through to see, like, did somebody already find this? And it was kind of like, oh, I found one that nobody else found, and entering it. The other thing was the bugs. LucasArts had a bug rating system. They were basically A, B, C, D, and I think F. There might have been an E in there, but A was basically like, the game crashes, you can't finish it. Like, the game is unfinished, or either crashes or is unfinishable, like in terms of logic. B bug was a bug that is obviously a bug. Like, anybody who sees it will say that's a bug, but it doesn't stop you from finishing the game. A C bug means that, people might not realize it's a bug, but it definitely is. I think D is a design bug. Conveniently starts with D, which is like, this is a problem in the design. And then E or F, or whichever it was I think it was E, or suggestions. They're like, these are things that I think should be in the game, or this is something that, there's a missing interaction here. You should add a line about this. Guybrush, there should be a joke about this thing because Guybrush knows about it or something. And so part of the game was to not just find bugs, to also be like, can I find an A bug, right? A bugs are more valuable to the whole endeavor if you can find a new way to crash the game, as opposed to sort of lighter weight stuff that people have not worked on yet. And usually when you're shipping a game, you'll have them ranked, and you'll work down the list of A's and B's, and then maybe some C's will ship, and hopefully D's were taken care of. And there's some cutoff. So if you can find an A or a B, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I could certainly see how that would be. You don't want to. I mean, nowadays, basically, when something ships, it's sort of already in like a mostly sort of tested state, it seems like, and a lot of it falls on the end users, because there's always those day one patch, or like the game will preload to your console or something, and then there is always like on launch day,
one patch.
Yes, you always get that one last push of code to try to get things up to a stable point, or resolve some sort of last minute kind of thing. And I certainly can't do that in the days where you're shipping media with those. You could not depend on people to have a modem on their machine or internet access, much less know that there was such a thing as a game patch and where to go looking for it. Become aware that it existed. You absolutely had to consider it to be something that is, well, most people will see it this way, and if we're lucky, some other people will have a chance to fix the bugs, and other people will see that. Yeah. We did have the so-called pizza orgy. It's not an orgy in the orgy sense. It was an orgy in terms of the gluttony. It should have been the pizza gluttony fest. Yes.
The Pizza Orgy event was an internal testing thing at LucasArts where they would bring in people who had never seen the game before because they would encounter and do things differently than a seasoned game player tester would. They came to it with fresh eyes, and they would get lots of good feedback from that. But it involved, piles of pizza and, bringing your friends and family, and they're going to try this thing. And they want people who had never played games before, as well as people who like games, but who had never played this game. And it was the only way we really got feedback, not only on how buggy it was, but also whether it was good. Because it becomes very difficult after a while of being very close to a game to understand if it's good or not. Because you're seeing all through the warts, and it comes together very slowly. And I imagine it must be similar to filmmaking, where it's like, okay, here's the daily cuts, and is this a good movie yet? And I think there's a I'm confusing the name. Nintendo guy, main Mario guy, Donkey Kong.
Oh yeah.
Saying that a bad game might eventually become a good game, but a good game might become a great game, but a bad game is a bad game forever. And the notion of like, if you ship it in that state, then you really kind of lose the ability to really shape it into something good before people see it. On the other hand, I really butchered that quote. On the other hand, we have things now like, early access, beta programs. We have Twitch. You can watch strangers play your game and talk to themselves while they're playing your game. Blows my mind. I still when I load up Twitch, you can subscribe to the games. I subscribe to Grim Fandango, and once in a while I'll boot it up and I'll watch somebody play my game, and it just blows my mind because it was impossible to think of that at the time. It was a real, you sort of let it go into the darkness, and then you hope it's good. Yeah. It was really something, and you really had to focus on that day one because it was going to be very expensive for the company. If somebody, at the time, you could say, I want you to mail me the patch on a disc. Yeah. Very expensive. On the other hand, hint line and helpline, very lucrative.
Yeah. Sierra figured that one out pretty early.
Yeah, LucasArts was always trying to make it so you didn't die, you didn't lose your progress, and so you could always move forward. But I can't deny, there was definitely people needed the hint line, and I don't blame them because again, without the feedback as to whether this puzzle is too difficult and needs additional hints, or that puzzle's too easy, we didn't. We had to kind of make a guess based on as many people as we had around who played it.
I think people are okay as long as the challenge is fair. So if it's just challenging, that's one thing. If it engages in a lot of moon logic, that's a totally different thing. So I know everybody talks about the monkey wrench in Monkey Island 2, how you were supposed to, because you've got to turn the little thing, and you actually have a monkey that's in the shape of a wrench.
I'm going to use the monkey as a wrench.
Yeah,
the flower sifter in Grim Fandango, the only place in the game where you would combine two inventory items.
Right.
Literally only place.
Yeah. You have to figure out where and I remember that exact puzzle, and it makes sense now. I think at the time I was a little frustrated because, again, it was a mechanic that didn't exist anywhere else in the adventure. So if it's consistent, then it's okay, because people be like, all right, I'm already, or there was something in the story that tipped the hat and let you knew exactly that this was going to be expected, or a callback or something. So
sometimes you got to make sure the character says the line again, and that's the only line left in the dialogue. I remember when I had my wife play Grim Fandango, and she's not a game player at all, had never played these games, and I'm watching her play and trying not to give her hints. And the first time Manny encounters a locked door, I think for the tube room, she just walks away. And I said, she's like, "Oh, I don't know what to do anymore." And I'm like, "Well, what about that locked door?" She's like, "It's locked." For anybody who's played an adventure game, it's like a locked door is something I'm supposed to get into. I'm supposed to get behind. I'm supposed to figure out how to get past that.
It's locked because it's a challenge.
Yeah, I understand. I recognize this as a puzzle. She didn't recognize it as a puzzle. She's just like, well, that's locked, so that's not part of the game. I don't go there. And so I think that's a really difficult thing in adventure games, and it's always kind of, at the time, working in a void, in a vacuum of feedback as to whether this is going to land and be solvable for people. There was always that guess. And so I think that's where a lot of people were frustrated at the time. And knowing what I was like as, once I got on the design side as well, it's like you're trying to come up with crazy, clever, creative puzzles, but you want them to be things that people can reasonably be expected to figure out. And then the question was, how much help do they need? And then, you had some games ship with like built-in hints. I think that was a big, kind of innovation in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. It's like eventually, it's like it'll tell you, like that's the last stage is like, I'll just tell you. Yeah. We didn't think of that. At the time it was,
That's kind of a more modern.
Every byte was like precious. And it's like, oh, there's bytes to spare to implement a help system. Amazing,
Well, I think that part of that too is just because audience have kind of changed. Younger people have gotten into this, like people that did not grow up with kind of the older, more like Nintendo hard kind of world of adventure games and stuff like that. So having item highlighting, I think, is kind of one of those things where it'll be if I'm moving around and something will like give me a little indicator that this is an actionable kind of thing or whatever. Yeah, sometimes that stuff helps, and I do like that. Even like a modern kind of game, like there's a lot of indie titles that will do this or something where you can actually just right at the beginning, you can just flip that switch and say, I want all the challenge, no helps, no tip of the hat. And then you've got something sort of, I know that Return to Monkey Island has a whole thing of just like that. It will kind of, if you don't know exactly what's happening, it'll kind of like hold your hand a little bit. And if you are away from the game for a while and come back, it'll be like, there's even the little, hey, do you want to do a little refresher on where we were?
Yeah, because maybe it was like when I was playing Sorcerer. It's been 6 months since you picked up the game.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe you were playing as a kid and now you're an adult and you're trying to finish the game you never finished. Yeah. I think all these these affordances, I think, are really great. I think expanding the pool of players and the people who will be satisfied and happy with their purchase is terrific. I'm a big fan of the fact that games now offer story mode, no challenge mode.
Yeah.
I do think that as game worlds have become richer and more detailed and more interactive, we have this difficulty of like, what is relevant detail? What is sort of inbounds for the game and what is out? I'm thinking of like Last of Us, or pretty much any game now that's third person, or actually even first person games where there's any kind of interactivity that's not combat, where there's like a dot on a thing you can interact with, like a little empty circle, and you get closer, it fills into a white circle. Yes. And that tells you the pile of bodies or clothes or rubbish or whatever in the room is not actually interesting. It's just scenery. Yeah. And players really need that to help them understand, because if everything's interactive, then you have to check everything. I remember I had that problem playing, let's say, Fallout 3, where I literally, like, if something opened and closed, I had to open and close it. It's like there was, and everything, was as interactive as possible. And so it's very difficult at that point to understand, like, if I don't crawl into every nook and cranny of every environment that I go, did I miss something critical and cool?
Yes. If everything feels important, then I feel like I'm supposed to investigate whatever this is, even if it's just, I'm on this like wild goose chase for something that's got nothing to do with the objective that I'm up against, or you just happen to interact with an NPC that's like, oh no, another rabbit hole.
Well, and so what's interesting about the time that we were doing this, there was this transition of, looking at the verbs and the interface for these games at that time. Mm-hmm. We went from like, there's a panel of verbs, there's a fixed set of actions you can engage in, mm-hmm. and there are pixels that are, you can run your mouse across the screen and see what's interactive. You can scan pretty easily. There's almost never a hunt the pixel, although people complain about that. You always had targets that are big enough that they can mouse over them and reasonably find them. Down to there's no verbs, there's a wheel, and that's kind of what Tim did in Full Throttle. Mm-hmm. Down to what he really wanted in Grim Fandango. He wanted the entire screen to be like a movie. He wanted there to be no HUD, nothing on screen. And we've seen other games that have over time, like Dead Space, have done things where they incorporate the HUD into your character. Your character has like his life meter was actually on his spine, his energy mm-hmm. level in the suit kind of thing. But there's that sort of desire and instinct to put in as much detail and make every pixel count and sort of have it, look real, or sort of verisimilitude versus the game conceits. And when you do that, there's a period of transition where you get it wrong. It's probably a good time to talk about Headlook tank controls on Grim Fandango. But there was that kind of thing where the things we were trying to accomplish to make this more like a film and be able to have more director or cinematographer kind of skills come to play meant that we were kind of breaking conventions and there weren't new ones yet to use. And so you had to kind of make them up as you went. And so I think that was one of the design things we struggled with, and that was we experimented with, and we didn't always get it right. And then, luckily we had a chance to correct it 20 years later, but 18 years later in the remaster. But it was very much a period of rapid change in terms of what games were and what was possible. I think going from those 2D adventures that I was testing to 2.5D, which is kind of what Grim Fandango was, and immediately after that to Half-Life and Unreal were coming out at the same time. Many of these full 3D environments, Doom to Quake, kind of changes or Dark Forces to Jedi Knight. That transition and having consumer 3D hardware, it was a very rapid period of innovation, and also there was a lot of sort of timing the market, like what do people have in their PCs? We always used to joke that like the target. What is the target spec for the machine for this game? It's whatever was on sale at CompUSA the Christmas before. You know what I mean? It was. You had to kind of look at that sweet spot and say, well, can we use this new hardware? No, we can't depend on it. That kind of thing. Or, oh, have there been other games that have ever done this? Well, yeah, this is a convention we can use. No, it's never been done this way before. We should probably be careful with that. But there was a constant sort of need to incorporate that progression, and it was really rapid at the time.
Yeah, I do remember people back in the day being a little kind of put off by the tank controls versus just the click interface to do stuff. But as someone who has probably played through all 4 years of Grim Fandango 10, 12 times, wow, it never bothered me. But as you brought up, it was like there's no HUD. Like basically you're just directly interacting with this very cinematic and very immersive sort of experience. Mm-hmm. Like this feels like a real world that you're actually in and part of in the fantasy environment and things like that. But that's the whole point, right? Is we're supposed to be having this kind of fun cinematic experience. And so the tank controls did not bother me because I just figure I'm kind of like it was a very tactile sort of thing because I'm walking to wherever I am going, and the control was really good because you do have to kind of line yourself up a bit.
Yeah, I mean we were influenced a lot by Tomb Raider, which was obviously tank controls, but it's different when the camera doesn't move. Right, it becomes a little different because if I'm pushing this way and then the camera cuts and all of a sudden I'm running the opposite direction, yes. Mm-hmm. What happens? Well, if I keep holding the button, and this is one of the things we actually did, if you keep holding the button, you keep going in that direction. But if you let up on the button and then press it again, you'll flip back and go yes. back, and the camera will flip the other way, and so it's very confusing. But those are the sort of conventions we were playing with and trying to understand what was comfortable for players. I think also we were struggling a lot with the notion of a 2D sort of like a Monkey Island kind of 2D screen to this 2.5D, and this sort of the authoring was very, very difficult. I mean, we were building custom tools, custom 3D renders, custom tools for editing things in 3D. Everything had to be built, not just the game itself. And it was a real struggle for us to figure out, like, well, how do we handle placement of these markers, and how do we make this hittable in these different directions when we're used to having just a square on the screen? If your mouse is in the square, you're hitting this thing. Yeah. How are we going to make this work? It was a lot, and I remember also just the head look for items. Tim was really adamant he didn't want words to just fly up on the screen to tell you what things were. He wanted to have an opportunity to put in a joke or a description for when Manny first encounters something. Yes. Have Manny talk to you, because the voice, now that voice was so, we struggled for a long time to get voice in games at all, and it used to be that every time you added a line, you're adding expense for the things you're going to have to record, but there was going to be voice no matter what in this game, how does the player know what to interact? Just like we were talking about before. And I think one of the things people don't realize, we got a little lucky in our character design. I think it was a little bit of a chicken and egg, but Manny's head being very tall as like a pylon, it makes it very easy to you can kind of see when he's not on full true up. He's clearly craning his head to look at something. Mm-hmm. And that was, again, Tim trying to make things as immersive as possible. Like, well, what would a character see? Well, he's like, maybe I'll go look over at that or like you're an investigator in a room, like what is useful here. But again, conventions where there was nothing before, and so there was, I think this is the kind of just baffling to me that we actually managed to get these games out at all. I mean, there was the amount of sort of inventing that we were constantly doing day by day, and sort of working in a vacuum in all the ways we talked about, and yet still having to do very technically different new things that we had to achieve. The tools we had to build, open source wasn't really a thing back then, so the only code you really had to use was whatever anybody else had written for one of the earlier games of the company, and whether that was good and usable or not. That was kind of how you learned, as well as taking apart other games that the company had made, but you didn't have access to game design courses and books and things like that. Those all came later. So to me, it's kind of a miracle at this point, looking back, that it's the games ever reached market at all. Just a testament to like pure grit and determination to make them happen. And we're seeing that again, I think, right now as well. We're seeing, the player expectations and the potential for richness of the game has get to the point where it's getting way too expensive to make a AAA game, and then there's this big crisis about what are games and are they economically feasible, and the indies come out to rescue everybody and show the people that no, games that look like Megabonk or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It looks like 2D it looks like PlayStation 1 graphics, and yet it's like, one of the hottest selling games of the year. And it's like, I think that's we're kind of getting past the verisimilitude as being the highest ambition for games, and the notion of indie or cozy games or games that only plays for 6 hours or whatever, or games that are, not trying to maximize every bit of hardware but can run on anything. I think that's actually reassuring now to see that, the sort of, to use sort of ludographic, what is the study of gameplay, like the game is more important than the trappings. We've kind of come full circle there. So I don't know, I find that really encouraging, actually.
Well, I think it's really good that we're at a point where kind of that PlayStation era graphics are now back as like high nostalgia. So
as an aesthetic,
the pressure is off.
Low poly.
You don't have to have something that looks like GTA 6 to have a game, and it doesn't have to have that level of this huge world and all this stuff, or like some big Bethesda Fallout universe kind of thing. You can have a good short story that is just engaging. I mean, this whole thing in the indie space where you have games that are adventure games, that it's a 3-hour story. Like basically, you just kind of
it's a boosh. It's a little. It's not a feast,
right?
But it's like a special candy with a high quality, chocolate.
Yeah, it's like we've got this idea that we want to tell you about. We got this little story, and it's here, and you're going to enjoy it, and then it's done, and you'll be left wanting more. And that's great. I'm glad that stuff exists. You have all of these strictly. There's no combat. There's no collect items. There's no anything like walking simulators is kind of what they call them now.
Amazing. And I think of like the Stanley Parable and like some of these other games where it's like, yeah, the environment itself is exploring the environment is the game, and it's delightful to kind of do this, and accessible to different levels of players. And I'll go out on a limb there. The whole get good crowd, like the whole like, oh, if you turn the difficulty down, or I only ever play anything on max, and that's the only thing. Get bent, man. Like, let people play games. Like, don't you want more people to enjoy games and enjoy your hobby? I mean, and then they'll get good later. I think it's great. I think there's games can be made by anyone, games can be made for anyone, games can be made about anything. I think it's terrific. People are still making text adventures, 40 years on. So
there's a game that came out a couple of years ago that's in that classic EGI Sierra style. It's a command interpreter game that's called the Crimson Diamond. It's basically just sort of a love letter to the Colonel's Bequest, which is the first one of those Laura Bow games, and it's a brand new game that just came out like last year.
So, and I think that's the other thing I enjoy is, and I before I left the game industry, this is one of the things I really enjoyed. When I go to E3 or something like that, and I would, meet somebody and they had grown up and played my game, and that had been one of the things that inspired them to make games. And so like we see these also like these cycles come where people are playing them in the target audience, and then their nostalgia comes with them as adults into the industry, and you get this new sort of the waves of inspiring things going forward. And I think we've seen, you know, kind of become used to that in film, and they're sort of like, oh, this era or the silent era, the noir detective era and things like that. And they sort of become homages to each other, and they inspire later things. You know, maybe there's like a taxi driver order. And I think we're seeing that in games too. And I really enjoy, you know, every time we think games have sort of run their course or shown us what they can show or become too commercial or whatever, there's some new reinvention of itself in the genre, and it comes with the people who grew up playing them. And I really, and I think, again, like, we don't have to create tools every single game. We don't have to write a graphics driver for every game. You know, we don't have to figure out how to put polygons on a screen in a game anymore. And I think the lowering of the barrier to entry there to where you can do something like a Megapunk or you know, whatever, it's great, because it means that if somebody has an idea, they're that much closer to actually being able to realize it without this sort of Herculean effort that we used to have to go through. So I'm pretty happy with all that.
Absolutely. It's sort of a golden era again for adventure games and for cozy titles and for stuff that it doesn't necessarily have to be that AAA game. It's just good stories.
It doesn't have to be Battlefield 6. It doesn't have to be GTA 6.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a continuum. And also the number of people who do retro gaming and emulation and preservation, amazing. I mean, outstanding. I never dreamed this game would be playable 5 years after it was made. I thought for sure this game would be unplayable, like most games were at the time. Like, you know, you had to have the exact version of Windows 3.1 with these drivers on some, you know, there's no way. And so it's been, to me, very humbling to see people take care of games and make them accessible. And you know, to some of it, it's like, oh, you know, all media should be available to me and nothing should be denied. There's that aspect too. But this notion of preservation for its own sake, so that these things don't just molder in vaults or landfills or, you know, culled from some museum collection that there's no room for it anymore. You know, I think there's you know, that spirit of game preservation to me is also like always made me very happy. And I don't know if the things that are at the top end, the big blockbusters, I don't know if those are the ones that people are going to, they'll be preserved. I mean, obviously they'll be playable. It used to be a question. It wasn't, you know, it's like, oh, what if the game developer goes out of business, or the platform goes out of business, or the store goes away, or the rights leave, or whatever. You know, piracy, game preservation, they're going to make things stick around. But what are the ones that people are going to be able to, like, I just want to be able to play that game I loved, and I want to know that I always have the option to go back to it and re-experience it.
Or games that simply exist as a multiplayer online experience that once those servers go down, that's it.
I think that's still an issue. I do think I haven't read up on it too well. I know there's a movement in Europe to try and make it so that there's, you know, there's sort of escrow for games, you know, so the games don't die like that. But I do think that's an issue. That's one place where I'm disappointed. I will say, I as an adult have very little time to get good enough to play a game online, and so, you know, I'm going to play online. I'm going to die a lot. I'm going to be the player at the bottom of the rankings, and I'm never going to play it enough to get good enough to play it. So those games are effectively locked off for me. They're experiences I can't have. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little disappointed at that. But on the other hand, like, this other aspect of, like, hey, when people do love those things, they should be able to play them, even if they're the last 6 people in the world who can field a team to play some game. They should be able to. And so the notion of, like, game servers as escrow is the way I think of it. Like, you should have it as, like, well, if you're not going to support it and decide you can't make money from it anymore, then just give it to the world. Give it to the preservationists. Mm-hmm. I think also I do a lot of server stuff now, and it's like, it's never been easier than now to have a Docker container that is enough to run a game server and could run on whatever hardware for the small number of people you need it to, because you obviously have that for, you know, for testing it. There were games they made for I think one of the multiplayer games, I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was Outlaws. Mm-hmm. They actually there was a crew on a submarine, and they said, we really want to be able to play this game when we're in this submarine, but we don't have access to the online servers, but we like playing multiplayer. Can you make a server that we can run locally? And anything for the boys, in the submarine.
Yeah, sure.
And so that notion that like you used to have, when you got the game was the server as well, and who was going to run a server, and the whole game spy, and how many servers are out there, and can I find them, and which one's the best ping for me? Like, again, the sort of Herculean levels of effort we went to play together.
Yes.
But there's in going to the ease and buttoned up and the sort of, accessible to anyone, I'm just going to press a button and get online, means we lost some of that independent ability to run the game when the company isn't around or doesn't want you to. And, you go back to the WoW servers and things like that. But yeah, so I think that's a really interesting thing to come up, and is again, sort of a recognition of where we are culturally, that like things are being lost, and that's not okay. Actually, when I was at PlayStation, there's a guy I worked with, Mike, and he was really focused on this, like that shipping a game meant also like basically bottling up a virtual machine, which included all the source code, all the tests, and all the assets, and all the specific versions of the compiler, and exact version of the operating system. There should be an image that's preserved in Amber for other people to understand how it worked, but also so they can come back and fix a bug, in years, when all the people are gone and long gone. So the sort of, the aliens at the end of AI, they come down, the Earth is sort of frozen over into a new ice age, and they're sort of sectioning out and carving and doing this archaeology through this this older civilization. This notion that you're when you create, it would be nice if your creation was preserved in a way that was not lost. So I think that the game industry is fighting for that. I think in a way that you don't have to necessarily for streamed or 2D media, non-interactive media, I guess.
I'll bring up two examples of that. Like one handled really well by a company, and one kind of handled not so great. One of which is actually Sony. I was one of those people back in the day. I've got 100 billion hours in Star Wars Galaxies, their MMO Star Wars game. And when they finally did shut that down, they had a big blowout. Like they were like, absolutely, we're opening everything up, like experience everything you want to. And they had like a big party at the end. It was really, really great. It was like such a wonderful send off. It wasn't enough for the fan community, because what people had been doing for years is basically just sitting there and sniffing all the traffic that went back and forth between Sony and the client. And like the day after, it was like, okay, well, here's your pre-combat upgrade virtual servers that you can play on, and here's your combat, and here's your new game enhancements, and whatever it is you want to do, you just go out and play it. And it was one of those things where I think everybody just kind of turned a blind eye, which is really nice, so that those things could live on. And one that was really handled very, very terribly, like Gun Media with their Friday the 13th game. That was something that was, it's a kind of a like one person gets to play as Jason, and everybody else gets to play as a camp counselor that are actually like based off of people that were in those movies. And everybody had different abilities, and you could level up and do stuff.
Asymmetric multiplayer. I love it.
Yes, and it was a ton of fun. And there's a game that's still on the market that kind of uses very much that same concept, but they lost the licensing. And when they lost the licensing, they were just like, well, we're turning off the servers too. And it was like, nothing to, that people could then turn around and host their own games or whatever. And for the minute that they did leave things up, but like weren't updating code, it just instantly turned into like a hack fest, and people just went on there and just ruined the whole experience. And so it was a very sad ending to kind of a very fun multiplayer experience.
So what's going on with the Counter-Strike servers lately? I haven't heard lately.
Yeah, right.
You're making me think of like, people, the fixed Counter-Strike petitions to Valve now. Like, hey, we still want to keep playing this game forever, and this is still making money for you. Why aren't you fixing the game?
Yeah, just an update every now and again, please. What's Gabe doing these days? Come on.
He's on a yacht. He's doing whatever.
You can only swim in your Scrooge McDuck money pit so much. Come on, get out and write some code, damn it.
His doctor has his own boat in the fleet, so that's it. At a certain point you're disconnected from the affairs of mere mortals.
I guess so.
Yeah.
We kind of talked about being a playtester and doing the quality assurance side of things, and then later you moved into a more active development role.
Yes.
We've kind of touched on Grim Fandango and Escape from Monkey Island and things like that, but can we maybe talk a little bit about developing the GrimE engine? It's a callback to your introduction. The GrimE engine, moving away from Scumm and onto those 3D worlds. Like, what was that process like? Like sitting there and trying to figure out, like, from a development point of view, like, how are we going to realize the vision of this game?
So actually, this is another callback earlier in the conversation about, you only had available what was there as pieces of earlier game engines in the same companies and other games. LucasArts was very good early on, I think, ahead of the curve in terms of making reusable engines. More games that sort of amortize the cost of development of the engine across multiple games. So that was the Scumm engine. Scumm technically was the name of the whole system, all the tools. The actual engine was Sputm, SPUTM was the actual runtime engine. Scumm was included. There was the whole tool set plus that, and then it also named the scripting language and so on. So LucasArts had a lot of experience with that. There was a lot of sort of banked experience with that, and they were doing sort of incremental improvements in the engine. Oh, now it can handle rooms that scroll vertically. Oh, now characters can scale when they walk into the distance. Oh, now, we've got voice. Or, oh, now we've got 256 colors. They were sort of incrementally adding these things, and that held them instead for a really long time. And so they were kind of building on what they had and kind of doing them with the needs of each new game. My initial boss there was Eric Wilmunder, who was called the Scumm Lord. He was like the person who sort of owned the Scumm tool set. And so when there were changes to be made, he'd usually be involved in them. And sometimes they were already going back at that point to think of sort of what we call remastering now, of the notion of like, oh, we're going to do a 256 color version of Monkey Island instead of 16 color, or we're going to do a version of Loom with talkie Loom instead of just text Loom. So they were already kind of doing that kind of thing and had sort of a lot of pedigree to bring things back and forward to look back for old content, make it sort of new again, but also be able to take on a new incremental capability. 3D was kind of a big deal. Like I said, it was all happening kind of at the same time that you had Dark Forces going to Jedi Knight. So Dark Forces, a 2.5D engine, which is like a Doom engine. It's kind of a parlor trick, if you will. It's not truly 3D in the way it renders and the way things work. It's not really polygons. It's all sprites. The rasterizer is not really a rasterizer. And so you had this sort of the adventure game sort of set of technology, and then we had the sort of nascent 3D stuff coming up, more free, like no fixed cameras going all over the place. And so the notion that, for Grim Fandango, we're going to be able to make use of all this new 3D technology that's being developed for Jedi Knight, and we're going to make use of all these reusable libraries that were made for Outlaws. Aaron Giles is the one who was making all the cross-platform tools, and so like, you want to make the game engines more cross-platform, we have more shared libraries that were cross-platform. We're going to be able to make use of all this stuff, and so 3D this and 2D that, and we've got the best of all worlds, and we'll have a little smorgasbord of everything. So when I went into, I went through what's called Scumm University, which is the new what they call them Scumlets. There was a whole thing. When new people come in, I was coming in with the Curse of Monkey Island people when they were being taught to use the Scumm engine. And as I was going through the whole time, I was thinking like, okay, so where does 3D come in? How am I going to make this work? What's going to have to happen to that tool? What's going to have to happen to this way things worked? And when it came time to do things in 3D, and I was like, okay, I gotta, I came out of, my university classes. I'd done 3D rasterizers, and I'd done 3D geometry, and vectors and points and all these kind of things. It's like the Scumm engine was still fixed point, and fixed point versus floating point. If you don't know, if you're not a technical person, you have integers, whole numbers, and then you have floating point is like any number of decimals. Well, computers actually aren't that precise, and that's where a lot of math kind of falls apart on computers. But the floating point basically says the decimal point can move wherever you want, and however many places after that are there. In fixed point math, there's the number of digits you have essentially after the decimal point is fixed, and the number in front of the decimal point is fixed. And so if you're going to a full 3D environment, you have floating point numbers, which can be anywhere, and you're trying to map them into this fixed point format, which came out of the fact that, the Scumm engine was originally for 8-bit computers. It had 8-bit integers, and then it had 16-bit integers, but it never had 32-bit integers. And so if you're trying to take 32-bit integers, 32-bit numbers, and you're trying to fit them into this fixed point of 16-bit, the math was just really hard to make right. And I was coming to this place where I was like, well, there's this whole tool chain that is built for all this stuff, and it's built around this fixed point notion, and it is always built around 2D screen space coordinates, and like, what does a coordinate mean in 3D in that world? I was having a really hard time making it work in my head. At the same time, I was looking at, the Jedi Knight engine. I was also taking, I was learning. This is my first job out of college, and I'm learning. I'm taking all this stuff apart, looking at how it's done, reverse engineering as I go, asking questions. The Jedi Knight team was, very much like, well, we're starting with 3D, and we have this nice character, animation stuff. So I was trying to take advantage of like, okay, I can get polygons on the screen. I can put textures on those polygons. I can make those polygons move in a hierarchical fashion on a skeleton. Like there's this sort of capabilities that they had. It was like kind of thinking, okay, this concept can come, and I was getting most of them. I was like, okay, what don't I have for making this game? Well, I don't have 2D backgrounds, but it's easy enough to put a 2D background in front of something and only render the 3D characters. So I thought that actually turned out to be pretty difficult to do right. I need a text engine for dialogue trees. I need some sprite animation stuff for when I animate 2D things in the background, and maybe have some video for more active stuff in the background. And it turned out it was like most of the stuff I wanted was in the Jedi Knight stack. It was not in the sort of Scumm stack. And I had a really nice text module that I got from Outlaws. And so I went to Eric Wilmunder, and I said, Eric, I think I'm going to try and make a new adventure game engine out of this. I think I'm better off doing this. And Eric kind of did this. He kind of went, and he kind of looked at me like with this sort of, oh, you sweet summer child. This sort of like, and I only found out later what that was all about, because this was like the third or fourth time people tried to make a new engine, and they'd always kind of failed. So there was a new engine that was supposed to be made for the X-Wing cutscenes called Render Droid. Or sorry, not Render Droid. The Droid engine, I think it was called. There was they had mashed together the Scumm engine with Insane, which was Vince Lee's engine for Rebel Assault for streaming video. That was for Full Throttle. And every time they thought they'd made something, that was going to be reusable, number one, it was really, you had not yet amortized all that initial development cost, and so people were breaking themselves to ship these games, and they hadn't really made something reusable in the end. And so it kind of, drove people to madness and destroyed teams, and sort of people never worked together again. And so Eric, when I was coming to him as this naive young programmer, Eric's like, I'm not going to try and dissuade you from doing this, because I've had this conversation before with all the people who came before you. And yeah, good luck with that, kind of. And I'll continue to be the Scumm Lord, and Scumm will kind of sail steadily on while this game engine you're going to make, falls on the shoals. I didn't know that. And I think that was kind of a kind of very happenstance lucky thing for me, was that I didn't know how much I didn't know, and so I wasn't afraid to try things and try and figure them out as I went. I think if I'd known more, I would have seen it as more of a big endeavor and wouldn't have tried as much as I did. But I had a demo coming up, and I said, okay, let's see what we can do. I'm going to show on screen, these elements have to be on screen at the same time in order to demonstrate that we can do this. I have to show that I can control and move a character. I should show that I can have a text tree. I should show that I have a scripting engine. That was a big one. Hardest one, actually, and the only thing that came from outside the company. That was the first use of Lua. That was a big deal. I had to have 2D sprites. I had to have 2D streaming video. And I had to have audio cues. And so like there was the sort of proving point where it's like I had a sprite of like the bulldog from Full Throttle, running in place, and I had Manny walking around and walking behind a desk. It's a big deal to watch a 3D character walk behind a 2D element, and be able to like show dialogue when I click a button next to something and his mouth, the texture's animated on Manny. And so, I kind of got to a critical point where people said that looks really cool and we're going to go for it. And looking back, it's like, God, they banked on me. Like this is my first job. I'd never shipped a game before, but we had enough solid tech coming out of the Jedi team and the Outlaws team. I really, can't thank those guys enough. The sound team, even, iMuse being reasonable. I was able to kind of stone soup it, and if I had a talent, it was recognizing where the seams were and where things could work together, and being determined enough that I don't give up, and I'll figure out a way to make things work, which maybe talks about my whole career. But anyway, it was a big transition. It was a big gamble. The game was also extremely ambitious. Tim was extremely stung by criticism that Full Throttle was too short. A game that was 8 hours long was too short.
But it's all action. There's no fat on that game.
No filler. There's no filler.
I know, and that's I do not understand the people being upset about that, because it's like every minute of that game is great. And the chapters flow really well. And it covers a whole lot of new ground, especially with like the combat sections. And I recently talked to Dave Grossman. He was talking about coming back and working on the arena scene where you have to drive the cars and things like that. And so it's really great. So I don't know what they're talking about.
And again, people who were like, well, I didn't get my money's worth. It's like, yeah, but more people enjoyed that game than ever did before, because it was an accessible experience. They actually finished. We don't have the stats, but I'm pretty sure that a lot more people finished that game.
Oh, yeah. So, very possible. Yeah. I love it. I think it's a really, really good game. And I do remember the first time I read in game magazines, stuff like that, that talked about the interface change, that it was basically just trying to but other companies were kind of doing that at the same time. I know Sierra kind of got away from having like a bar down at the bottom. So it feels very cinematic. It pulls you right into that story, and with all the actual like cinematics that you watch during the game and things like that, it's good. It's still a pretty good.
And the writing, honestly, is can't beat a Corley. Is just like a line I always come back to over and over again. And the great voice acting, Mark Hamill in there. It was great. It was great.
Maurice LaMarche, whatever. It's the guy. He's literally everything. The guy that's in everything. So it's quite a few people on that.
So that was Steve, not Ash, Steve Shaw, who went to Microsoft much years later while I was at PlayStation. But Steve Shaw was the sort of engine person on Full Throttle, and it was the same sort of thing where it's like it broke the team, like people wouldn't work together again, like it was just really stressful, and like it was a similar thing that there was sort of a one person that was sort of riding on to kind of make it all work and put it together. In that case, mashing the insane engine from Rebel Assault into Scumm. But I didn't realize he was the previous version, the previous generation of me, like going through the same sort of thing with the same set of people and the same sort of constraints. But anyway, we managed to get through. And so the thing I had going for me was that, I in understanding the Scumm tool chain, I could see like there's a role for, we call them sets and setups, just like you wouldn't, we had to have multiple cameras in the same room, whereas in Scumm, every background was a new room essentially. And there was this notion of like there's a tool, the costume tool in Scumm. We referred to characters wearing costumes, which is what they look like on screen. And like, in order to do these certain actions, I have to load up the costume that allows me to do those actions. So we have the notion of characters wearing costumes, where the costume consisted not just of they're 2D textures, but also the 3D shapes they're wearing. So when Manny wears the babushka hat, in year 3, or sorry, the start of year 4, or the Johnny Thunderhead.
Yes.
Those were. I had the notion there's going to have to be costumes, and there's going to be a tool for editing costumes, which is assembling together all the animations for what that costume can do, and characters can change costumes for different things. And so there was a pattern that I could follow where I could kind of, use the footsteps that people before me to show me, like, these are the things I should be looking for. Something like, it's like walking in a dark room. It's like, okay, somewhere over here, there's going to be a side table. And over here, in front of the door, I know I should be able to walk at least a few steps without hitting anything. And like, this sort of like in a dark room, I knew what an adventure game engine needed. What were the key ingredients? Scripting language was ultimately the glue for everything. And that was, again, an early LucasArts innovation, was recognizing the value of domain-specific languages, which is to say languages that are not about just bashing bytes together, but that are a language that is at the appropriate level of abstraction for writing an adventure game, like writing a script for a movie. And I think a lot of things went right. A lot of it was sheer terror, honestly, at the once I realized what I'd taken on, but also sheer commitment to the vision. I was very attached to it because I've been there from the very earliest design days. So a lot of those puzzles are my puzzles. A lot of those ideas are my ideas. Some of those characters are my characters, a real commitment to seeing it through. But it nearly broke me, and it kind of broke the team. At the time, there was a, kind of, Tim had 2 or 3 in a row where the team kind of shattered at the end of the project. This was no exception. I think we were not great at mental health and looking out for each other, and crunch was a huge part of that. Just the pressure of, we have to make Christmas, we've bought the end caps, or we've spent the money, and we have to make this come out by day X, kind of thing. Yeah, it was a big endeavor, but it went okay. Grime, for the Grim engine, it was named Grim Engine Grime because Grime sounds like scum.
Yeah.
Sorry, we got a dog jingling his tags over here.
We got a couple of those floating around here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I just saw the what's the Twitch streamer? There's some streamer who was like, his dog was annoying him, and he actually zapped it with a collar, and the dog sat down and cowered. Like, there's some controversy.
I think that this will absolutely date this interview, but I think that what ended up happening was he came back later and he showed that the collar that he uses with the dog was not one that actually has that built in or something. That that something he had clicked or done something else. So it wasn't that he just like shocked his dog to make it be submissive or anything.
A clicker or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was something, and it's I can't remember exactly what was said, but it was I did hear that the follow-up was that he had showed the dog's collar off, that this is absolutely not something that like a shock collar.
I'm not going to get it.
I don't know.
I will just say that one thing I like about the COVID era is that, and game streaming in general, is that you get to see the inside of people's homes. And I think seeing your people's dogs and cats is one of the greatest pleasures of ever interacting on them. So it's like, yeah, of course I got a dog here. I'm not going to keep him out of the room. That'd be torture.
Yes. And I think that a lot of people's tolerance on that stuff changed, because it's like, oh, you don't understand. We're having a business meeting. You can't hear kids in the background. And then there's that guy that the kid,
I remember,
just just right in the room, and the mom is there, and she's pulling the, the baby is coming in on the walker.
The greatest comedic sequence ever committed to Pixels, and it was a total accident, and it's gonna be hilarious generations from now.
Yes,
so
it will never that, and I don't know how to turn off the cat filter, so we just need to proceed with the meeting.
Yes.
I just, it's all just part of our shared. What a terrible time, but punctuated with little funny things that just like the humanity of yes.
And I think that's exactly that. When you see people streaming, you like to see their messy bedroom or whatever.
My gosh, look at all this. I'm
looking with awe at your array of Macs there. Do you have a Pippin?
I do not have a Pippin, but I do have several friends that have Pippins that have done like restorations on those, and they're like 100% ready to go. Like you can play all the Marathon 2 that you can stand.
Yeah.
But
Aaron Giles was working on a port
lot
of something to the Pippin.
Oh, really?
When I shared my office with Aaron Giles, he was working on a port of some of the Pippin right when I arrived at LucasArts.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I know that Apple and Bandai had really put a lot into that they were really trying to get into that consumer space. And 95 and 96 is such a weird time, especially for Apple, with just like everything that got discontinued after like with Steve Jobs coming back and everything. And it was just like, why are we in all this consumer electronics? The wrong end of the consumer electronics stuff. Let's ditch all this. And then I got this idea for selling people music on the internet.
I mean, think of the other things at that time, like the 3DO. You know, like there was this weird sort of consumer electronics, and even the Xbox, like this sort of weird, like, oh, it belongs like among your stereo equipment. It's not a game console.
Well,
anyway,
it had to have, Sony PlayStation. It's like the PlayStation 2. It's like it's got a DVD player built in. Xbox DVD player built in. Sega Dreamcast no DVD player. Weird. I wonder how that did in the market. It's like
funny you should say that.
We needed two things to get out of it. Sorry.
Well, let me tell you. So that's our. You've brought me back around. You teed me up for another thing, which is what happened with the GrimE engine. So, the GrimE engine, its first reuse was for a game called Escape from Monkey Island, where I was called into the tech lead on that, and they said, "Yeah, there you go, there it is." And they said, "We want to ship this on this new console called the Dreamcast, and you got to figure out how to make that happen." And when I made Grim Fandango, they had talked about like, oh, could it go on the PlayStation? I was like, it doesn't have a Z buffer. We're dependent on Z buffer hardware. There's no way this could happen. And then they're like, okay, but really, for this next game, it's got to be on a console. And Dreamcast looks like the up and comer, and Sega really wants to work with us. Can we make this engine work on the Dreamcast? And I was like, no way, it can't happen. This is still not a real Z buffer. It had all this strange hardware in it, Power
VR
something hardware. Yeah, Power VR, that was it. And Randy, who's one of the engineers on the team, he's like, I bet I can make, because he had some key insights about the way the characters interact, 3D versus 2D, and the sort of sorting, this notion of sorting them into layers, again, everything old is new again. When you come back to a theater and the proscenium and the sort of like multiple layers of scenery, 2D scenery that you would walk in and around among as a character, you could hide behind a 2D bush on a stage, right? And so his recognition that that's really what's happening. And so what we're really doing is we're pasting the sort of high-res stuff onto these cutouts. And as long as we know when people go, so that's what happened for Escape from Monkey Island. That was right around the time I was leaving. Randy had that working, and really, really, really smart insight to get that going. I was sure it wouldn't work, but he got it going. And so that made the game much more lightweight, so it could run on the Dreamcast, but it also made it a little bit more portable for other different kinds of hardware, which helped. But on the other hand, the world where you had to have 2D high-res backgrounds and 3D characters, it was a very limited period in the whole evolution, because very soon the 3D hardware became powerful enough that it looked passe. And that's not to say it still doesn't look great today. Those backgrounds were rendered, they look as beautiful today as ever, maybe a little low res. But the characters against them kind of show the age of the hardware and the target hardware at the time. We were scrimping for every polygon. And so, and then also you had games like Half-Life showing some storytelling in a 3D world.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, well, this 2.5D era isn't going to last. So GrimE was kind of an engine for that era, and then that era, that was the end. It didn't really go very far. And that also was then the time when game engines became complex enough, and there were commercial providers of middleware. So you had things like Unreal Engine, or you had, later you had Unity, but you also had things like, Insane was it was a big deal to have video. You had to write your own video codec. And it was like, well, QuickTime's too heavyweight for games, but there's these others from what's the company? Not they made Granny later, but Blink, right? They have these codecs that you could just buy off the shelf and not solve that problem because it's not a problem we're solving anymore. And I also really appreciate that. It's like for my whole career, and this is, I think, again, to the sort of reuse notion of like, why should you make everybody solve the same problems over and over? Give them new problems to solve. Let them work on interesting new stuff.
Yeah.
Take stuff out of their way. If one person solves it, other people should benefit from it. So that, kind of going the open source route as well. And anyway, so that's kind of what happened with the GrimE engine. So the Dreamcast was sort of Escape from Monkey Island was very much a Dreamcast centric product, even though it really kind of only really went out and was big on PC. It was Dreamcast was hugely influential on the way that developed in the technology sense.
Yeah, I was going to say that was kind of the first one that got like a wide release because it's PC, Mac, PlayStation 2, Dreamcast, and and through kind of its life in the digital realm, a million other things now. So,
yeah.
I know that people kind of look at it and it's kind of like a weird entry in the series. I think it's an okay game. It is a big departure though from everything else, and I think that didn't really, especially when it was so established, that maybe kind of hurt it. And also,
and this is where I think it was Mike Stemley and Sean Clark as the leads on that. It's a different team, so it's not the same team that worked on Curse of Monkey Island, which in and of itself people had complained was a departure and too cartoony, and this is Guybrush has no neck, what's going on, or has no chin, which was a departure from the Tim and Dave, Monkey days, and Ron. So different teams make different games, but the other thing is that, at a certain point you couldn't go back to Scumm. Right. Yeah. I mean, they could have, because that's kind of what has happened now with, Curse. What's the new ones?
Return.
Return. Mm-hmm. And you can go retro and that stuff and say, well, it's going to look cartoony, but it's also going to be in 2D, but it's going to be, with a lot more pixels that we can express things in, or like Broken Age. We've come around again to where that aesthetic has its own charm, and you're not trying for the verisimilitude, right, of trying to make 3D perfect, detailed characters. They were kind of stuck because they weren't going to go back at that point to full 2D, and they had GrimE to build on, and this was the sort of period of, like I said, where 2.5D was, the 3D characters on 2D backgrounds was kind of where things were for that level of detail in adventure games. You're going to look at the scene for that long. They need to be really detailed backgrounds. So they were kind of dealing with the engine they had in front of them, the technology they had in front of them, and then the art style. How does that work with, you're trying to maintain that whimsical sort of cartoony art style of Curse, but you have a polygon budget, and you really have to squinch down and make a lot of angular compromises in what would have been a very floaty or dreamlike environment, whether it's Bill Tiller backgrounds or Larry Hearn characters, right? So, you do what you can with the time. But I think also this was, the series was going through a series of different creators. It's a little different. Each one was doing their own thing. I don't know. It's to me, every game is a compromise of what was possible at the time, and how much could you will through all the obstacles to the market. I don't know.
Everybody's just doing their best, and it's
everybody's doing their best. Everybody's doing their best.
Everybody's just doing their best, and sometimes you get those projects and stuff where there's market demand for things, and it's people have moved on, and you have to kind of move ahead.
So, yeah.
I know that very much a lot of those things also kind of happened at Sierra, where you had kind of the two guys from Andromeda that made a lot of the Space Quest games, and then they left, and so there was a handing, like a passing of the torch to a new team of people, and the new games have a different feel. They're not bad. They just they're different. It's like when Norm Macdonald left or was fired from Saturday Night Live, and then you've got Colin Quinn. I think part of his opening monologue was basically, it's sort of like, you've been coming to this bar for years, and you come in and there's a new bartender, and it's like, but it's the same place and you're getting the same stuff. Anyway, my name is Colin. What can I get you?
Yeah.
You know? So it's
Jon Stewart was not the initial host of the Daily Show, right?
Yeah, but at least
it becomes a different show.
Format, yes, a format change as well. So yeah, absolutely. So you can still enjoy those things, but I do think you have to keep an open mind and realize that, you know, like the gap between Monkey Island 1 and Monkey Island 4 is like over a decade.
It's decades and multiple generations of technology and people.
People move on and want to do other stuff. So you just be kind and have one of those attitudes where it's like, this is good. Maybe it's not for me. It's good, but I'll let other people enjoy it. I'm not going to run it down.
I got to say, this is very timely because I was just reading the criticism of James Gunn and Peacemaker and Superman and sort of different tone of all these different DC properties. Yeah. And he made a really good point, because I collected comics growing up, and he said, there was a Detective Comics Batman, there was a 60s Batman, there was Brave and the Bold, there was the Justice League, there's Batman the character appeared in all these things, and you kind of understood Batman, like, this is not a horror comic, I'm not going to see Swamp Thing in the Justice League or whatever, right? Yeah. And so this notion that different writers and artists would take the same character and put their own style and tell their own story with that character in a different situation, it had a different tone and look to it. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And not everybody's going to read and like every comic book, but they could still enjoy the character, or maybe they're going to be a completionist and say, "I got to do it. I didn't like that or whatever." But you're not going to begrudge it. And I think that DC and Marvel were always gambling on new combinations of artists and writers with established properties that had a beloved fan base following hanging on everything there. Mm-hmm. And James Gunn said something recently where he's like, yeah, if the tone is different between this set of people with that character in a movie and that set of people with a TV show and that set of people in, Creature Commandos, which is animated, that's fine. That's good. And these things should show their teams and be, and I think maybe, it was a comment or response to the fact that the Marvel movies got very sort of one note, kind of the consistency that was sort of the larger universe became its own enemy. Mm-hmm.
We have to eventually be able to make these things do this, so we can't have.
We can't depart too much. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But then when you see something like a Taika Waititi Thor, and it's like, wow, that was different, and it was its own thing. Mm-hmm. I think that you have to, and this is again the same way games are for everyone. It's like creators will find their own audiences, and you have to not yuck other people's yum. You have to allow for the idea that something's not for you.
Yes.
And say, I prefer this to that, or they lost me here. But that doesn't mean that I have to convince you you're wrong for liking it, right? Or they're wrong for making it. Mm-hmm. I think like we just said, everybody's trying to do the best they can with the constraints they've got, whether that's money or time or available people or technology obstacles or pandemics, war, fascism. People are trying to create under all kinds of circumstances, and we should celebrate that things get made at all, and that we can see these things and experience them, and not begrudge the people who kind of sweat blood into them. So, I'm really, the whole Gamergate thing and the sort of arch, edgelord aspect of the gaming community, and they're sort of looking down on all these things, and they'll go out and trash things and wreck them or mock them or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Actively try to ruin
something that brings you joy.
I know.
Rather than wrecking things that bring other people, find something that you like better and go do that. Don't get attached to the hating. So
I think that it's one of those fundamental things, and as you get older, it's something that you kind of pick up on, where it's like people that are hurting want other people to hurt as much as they do. So I think people that come into those communities and want to wreck stuff for other people, it's the kid that went to the sandbox and was kicking over everybody else's sandcastle, and it's because when they got home at night, their parents ignored them or were it does not justify their behavior, but it goes a lot of the way to explain it.
I think there's also well, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that it's those people that you'll encounter them your whole life. That everybody's kind of going through something, but not everybody has the emotional intelligence enough to recognize that in other people, to be like, you know what, you're having a bad time. I'm just going to give you some space, and even if that is, I'm going to remove you from this community so that you can. Okay,
you can go work out your stuff.
Let me go ahead. I get my Phantom Zone projector. And good luck. Yeah. So, but no, you're right. You brought up the whole thing about like the different versions of Batman and different versions of these universes and things like that. And absolutely, DC. I mean, if you go back, I mean, you could read Golden Age comics if you absolutely want to, and you're going to very quickly realize that the first few Superman stories are all about like. There were people that owned a coal mine that worked people to death, and so Superman trapped them down in the coal mine to get a little bit of
industrialists that he,
absolutely. And it's
early Batman had a gun.
Yes, yes, they were just trying to figure things out. But I mean, especially with like James Gunn and like all this stuff, Peacemaker is not a holy character. None of that universe is. These are all Charlton comics that were bought by DC and turned into other characters and probably expressed in their ultimate form in this little thing written by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons called The Watchmen.
I have my separate first Mylar, I have all 12 issues.
Yeah. I reread Watchmen every year.
I have a couple copies of the graphic novel that I constantly lend out to people who never read it.
Yes, and that's another thing. I rebuy a copy every couple of years because there's always somebody that's never read it, and I give it to them because I'm like, this is such an important kind of story that kind of turns comics on its head, and it's gritty and it's kind of realistic, but at the same time, it is absolutely a story about how your heroes are often the most flawed people and it's like, I mean, if you're looking for a story where Batman and Robin are throwing fruit pies to the Joker, you're not going to enjoy this. But if you're able to look at it from the point of view of that there's this big complex universe and complex characters and all of that, then you'll be fine. So people that are like, oh, I don't like this portrayal of Watchmen, I don't like this portrayal of
Superman or Batman or whatever.
It's I mean, they've done a million things. Alan Moore, you were talking about the crossovers and what they allow in that universe. Alan Moore literally wrote a Swamp Thing Superman crossover episode or a crossover book. So it's like, just if it's not your thing, it's fine. Yeah, don't read it if you don't like it.
About this community and this sort of dumping on other people's things. The other thing is that there's an exclusionary. Like, I enjoyed this. I found my piece. I found something I really liked.
Yes.
And you don't enjoy it the way I did, the same way. And you're somehow diluting my experience of that by that. And so I'm excluding you from the community of fandom, from the true fans, whatever we're gonna real gamers, whatever we're gonna say. And there's this sort of exclusionary hierarchical, I was here first.
Yeah.
And you're coming into my space and you're changing it from something I liked. And I want it to be back the way it was, or I want it to be preserved. And there's a status thing there that, again, I feel like, obviously, it reverberates throughout the way we interact with each other and talk to each other in society, and the way people are dividing into these camps, where it's like the retrograde versus the progressive kind of mindset around, like, well, who's a person, or who deserves rights, or who should be in charge, and all these things that I think are about people trying to cling to something that made them feel secure or safe. Or they felt like was theirs, rather than saying, there's enough for everyone, and there's place for everyone, and maybe they're not exactly like me, or that they're not doing it the way I would, but that's okay. And that's, whether it's other players, other creators, other writers, I think you need to have a much more expansive sort of view of the world and people to kind of, allow other people to be happy.
Yes, we're supposed to
find new happiness for yourself. Find new happiness.
Yes, we're supposed to delight ourselves in novelty.
Yeah, or become a historian and like do preservation, that kind of stuff. Like, you can do that kind of stuff too. But it's like, don't begrudge people doing their best to make good things and to enjoy things in the way they want to.
Yes, they put something out there. What have you done?
Yeah.
You know, they put everything into this. What have you done to be able to criticize this? And constructive criticism is one thing, because feedback is a gift, but it has to come from a place of that we're having a respectful conversation, or that whatever the end goal of this will be productive for whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. So I think that we need some people that want to be gatekeepers in whatever it is that it might be, whatever that topic might be, to do a couple of things. They need to either recognize that the future moves on, and you either stay up with it, or you politely excuse yourself. You protect your legacy, and you step back and you let other people pick up this thing and go. It doesn't change everything you had. It's still there. You can still enjoy it. The existence of other things doesn't detract from that. So just, fix your hearts or die, I guess.
Fix your hearts or die is a great way to put it.
I guess it's basically, I'm not the one. I mean, that's,
Yeah. No, it's a very pithy way to express it. Not where you expect to start when you're talking about retro gaming, but
it absolutely goes into my next question. I know that we really talked a lot about LucasArts. I just got one last little thing. It's actually not about LucasArts. It's about our friends over at Double Fine and the remasters, and how that is actually sort of a very proactive game preservation, is reissues and updating the code and bringing these games back out with a little bit of polish. Because I will say that earlier in the interview, you had said something about, I didn't think Grim Fandango would be able to be played in 5 years.
Correct.
I didn't think, and there was a point where it did break, because there are some AI puzzles in the game that require some very specific timing on things, both inside like DirectX and Windows and things, and then the speed of the processor. So I think that like there's two things that break just right at the end of year one. So there's the you've got to go and you've got to plant the directional sign, and then I think that the beavers break as well.
Beavers,
That they'll just never come.
I'm not sure. I don't think I was around for the beavers thing, or the signposting year one. The one that bit us at the time of release was the elevator puzzle, where you have the forklift in the elevator. And
you gotta.
One of the scripts was written in terms of the frame rate instead of time, and so if the frame rate was 200 frames a second, then the elevator goes zoop, and you never have time to drive the elevator where you need to go. And so that was us. We the developers didn't have powerful enough machines. We had machines that were like whatever was on sale at CompUSA the Christmas before. And it was only after we heard these complaints, it was like, oh, people who got the whatever was on sale at CompUSA the next year, the more powerful machines, they're too fast for them to solve that puzzle. And so that's when we had to put out a patch for that, and that was very frustrating for us to actually do that. On the other hand, the patch allowed me to add things like, we had some deaf gamers, and they're like, hey, where Glottis sings this song, which seems like a big fun part of the game, is totally inaccessible for us. So I got to add, subtitles and animation for that kind of stuff. I got to put that stuff in the patch. But again, like how many people actually knew they could get that patch, had access to go get it? We don't know, right? How many people's...
I remember back in the day, you could go out to the website when everything got a little more web enabled. That was out there. That was one of the 1.01 patch or whatever it was.
So we were like, we're not sure how many they're going to find us to do. We better get everything we can in this first one, in that first patch. But yeah, so the preservation side, the game became unplayable with certain versions of Windows and DirectX, and we had a lot of assumptions we made about hardware at the time in terms of texture formats that we thought everything would support. It turned out not every piece of hardware supports them, or it became more common that it didn't support them. Games, they essentially rot, unless there's sort of a very hard abstraction. I think PlayStation's done a pretty good job with that, at least at the time I was there, of making sure that there's a hard abstraction that you can rely on, and that has made emulation possible. But I think that notion that like more people deserve to see this or want to see that, The notion of a cult classic, people always talk about GrimE having not made its money back. I think Tim said that it did break even and make a profit, but the widely perceived to have not done that at the time, or not enough people saw it while it was still playable and buyable. And so it's kind of this sort of lost work essentially. And so you remaster this thing, and again, following from what's happened in film, where you'd have these negatives moldering in a vault. And it turns out if you find them in time and scan them at a higher res, you get a beautiful new print of Star Wars, for example, or whatever. And so I think that I was very excited because I was at PlayStation, and it was a collaboration with PlayStation and Double Fine and Disney to get the rights for GrimE kind of shaken up after Disney bought Lucasfilm, and make that business collaboration happen where people want to do it. We had Oliver Franske at Double Fine, who had written his own Grim Fandango engine as sort of, this guy loved the games and he wanted to make his own engine for the same assets. So they had that kind of working. It was just the right time for this kind of stuff. And I think also there was an economic incentive there where it's like, well, the assets and the game design are already done and we know it's a hit, but we just, can we spend less and use something we already got while we're working on these bigger things to kind of fill in the holes in our schedule. And there's a whole other podcast in like the cycles and vicissitudes of game development, and like a game ramps up to this many people and then ramps down to this many people, and what do you do? What do those people do in the meantime if there's not another game to work on? And how does small studios survive and things like that? I got the Tim called me up and he's like, "Do you have assets? What did you steal?" Because everybody tries to take a little bit of their work with them, and I had the source code for the game engine. I didn't have the original assets. I had the baked assets. I had a lot of our concept art. We're looking at the background here. Some of that stuff got swiped because it was so beautiful. I didn't have any of the original, but I had, some of our working documents, our storyboard kind of stuff, which is all Peter Chan art, stuff like that was kind of grist for this remaster. And I'm like, here, take it, please. Yes, make it happen. And then they called me up to sit with Kevin Bruner, who had later founded Double Fine and basically rebuilt the same game engine and game tool set a third time for the Telltale game engine. We went up there and we sat together in a studio and talked about tech. And so that's on the soundtrack. Didn't get paid a dime for it, forgot to ask for money. I was just so excited that it was happening. And I was at PlayStation for many of those years, and I was at the E3 PlayStation press conference, and it was loaded to the rafters at the stadium in LA, and they were announcing all these huge games and Metal Gear this and Final Fantasy that. And when they announced that they were going to do Grim Fandango, I was at the top back of the stadium, and the stadium erupted. It erupted. I could not believe the response it got. And I was pretty much in tears. I could not believe that, number one, this many people had even heard of the game, much less thought so highly of it that they would be, out of their seats cheering for the fact that this game is going to be brought back. So it was very emotional for me, very, very emotional, to see that it had like this sort of, loving embrace waiting for it to come back with its warts and all, all the tank controls and whatever. But yeah, it was a big event. It was huge. It was really great.
Oh yeah. I'm really glad that they're here because again, it has made them accessible to a whole new generation of gamers. It updates. Number one, like the rendering is much better. It's like scaled up all the assets.
Pulled off some amazing stuff. I mean,
yeah, the audio.
I don't know how I never thought at the time. I just watched the video the other day. Oliver presented at the Game Developers Conference or somewhere and recorded like, here's what we did for the remaster, and they pulled off some amazing things. I mean, they showed some of the tools they built specifically for recovering, information from the sort of decimated assets that shipped. It was amazing, and the lighting, like all things that we would have done if we could have at the time, And they did ask me at one point. They're like, what would you have done? What would you, if the technology was an obstacle, or if you had more time, what would you have done? And they did most of those things. A lot of it was lighting, because the background lighting and the was soft homage was beautiful. When we made the sort of bake off between the 3D rendering packages, soft homage and mental ray cleaned house because the lighting was so good. And it only highlights how flat the lighting is in front because we're dealing with performance issues. You can only have so many lights in a scene, and they can only be this many point lights. And so the lighting is just spectacular. The Venetian blinds on Manny's face in the first few scenes are very, totally cement the noir world there. He looks more part of the scene and part of the background, part of the world. I think all those things are really good. There's one thing I wanted them to do they didn't do, and I think there's probably a style. They probably could have done it. It wasn't a technical issue. It's probably more like a style issue, which is that Manny is everybody in the game is fairly low poly, and I always felt like we were always trying to creative constraints, as they say. The artists were trying to make as much happen with as few polygons as possible. The performance constraints we had, it was like, well, what if you had more polygons? What would it look like? It's like, well, I would like it if Manny's silhouette wasn't quite so angular, if you couldn't see the corners on these things. So I always had this notion, even back in the day, that rather than be polygons, we should be using Manny's head, his mesh, as like a control mesh for a subdivision surface, which means you get the rounded corners in there, kind of the Jerry's camera. I'm looking down here at the bottom right here, Manny's fingers there, where he's kind of got the bony fingers around the joints there. That notion of that's fair. That's a lot of polygons to get that kind of boniness. But if you use it, the polygons not as like, here's the polygons we're going to render, but that's the control mesh. We're going to do a subdivision service. You could potentially do things like that, where you could soften out his silhouette and silhouettes of other characters. So that's about the one thing I didn't see get in there. The other thing is just the resolution of the backgrounds. We never had access to the original high scale art that was then scaled down to make the 640 by 40 backgrounds. That was the resolution we had to work with at the time. We weren't going to ship more than that because it was already spanning 3 or 4 discs. So we never had access to that stuff. I think those are the only 2 things that are really missing that I would have really liked to see. I delve in periodically and look at some of the fan stuff they've done, just like they did at the time, to pull in the mouse controls and so on. There's a person recently working on basically extending them, making it letterboxed.
Yeah.
And sort of adding in side elements to scenes, which is technically very difficult when you think about what's happening, where you have a 3D character and has to can the character walk over that scene or not? And if he does he walk in front of things or not? And I'm always excited to see what people are doing, kind of, again, sort of like with a game that they love, that they feel inspired to, like, what if I could do this? I'm going to try it and see if it works.
I didn't find the pillar bars all that objectionable, because it fits the art deco style of the game and all that, so it fit right in. And the backgrounds, they were nice to start with, so that helps a lot. I mean, I could see like Monkey Island 2 backgrounds getting blown up and be like, ugh, but
no, we had a shockingly talented team, and those people have gone on to do amazing things. Adam Schnitzer went on to Pixar, doing a huge number of beloved Pixar films. He did some of the earliest and most beautiful renders, like the coffin shooter room, or the coffin packing room. Beautiful lighting, man. That guy's sense of light was incredible. All these people, if you just look at where the artists have gone, they've gone to Leica, they've gone to Pixar, they've gone to Disney, they've gone just everywhere, and they all have these side projects, which are the passion projects for these beautiful, kids storybooks, or funny monster drawings from Graham Annabelle, and all these, just a phenomenal convocation of talent in that team, and so that's why some of it holds up so well. And but the funny thing about that is that 90% of the team had never touched 3D before we made the game. So they'd only ever done 2D illustration, 2D art, animation. I was on the interview panels for the artists coming in, and we had person after person coming in like, yeah, I work with 3D Studio. 3ds Max wasn't a thing at the time. I work with 3D Studio, and look at all my shiny robot, kind of Tron-like.
Look at look at all of my primitives.
All my default light, default primitives, whatever.
Right.
And when they worked with soft homage, the Pete Sakel, who's the lead artist, or sorry, lead animator, lead artist. I think Eric Higginson's lead animator. They brought them in and they said, we're going to teach you this tool. And the interview process was like 2 days. It's like, we're going to do a day where we teach you all this stuff, and then we're going to give you a day to see how you use that, and you're going to animate a thing. And the creativity that came out of the people who had actually gone to animation school at like Ringley School of Design or others, versus the people who just like, I make shiny surfaces. I mean, those people fell apart instantly. And the creativity out of the 2D animators who were just using a new tool set for the first time, just phenomenal. I remember one person animated a juice box. They chose to animate a juice box and make it like, and that's what they did in school. Like their whole thing was like adding character to objects through the way that they invest their themselves in the animation. Mm-hmm. And Dave Bogan and Vam. I remember all these people, and we had such a great team, and they were so hilarious. Such a great set of people. And so yeah, I do think that a lot of the sort of aesthetic decisions hold up despite the constraints. I think that's really great. And Peter Chan. I mean, honestly, the Peter Chan concept art, all the stuff that we're looking at the background here, all the storyboards we had, all the, just terrific. Peter Sakel's, character designs, just a wonderful group of people.
Oh yeah, no, it's such a pretty game. It's so much fun to play. It's got a wonderful story. It's for a story that involves the afterlife and skeletons and demons and all of these like otherworldly things. It's such a human story about love and longing and like redemption, and it's got it all. And the film noir. And Dia de los Muertos and all of that. It just in the Art Deco styling, it just somehow yes, it is like this weird goulash of things that just separately are really great, and when you put them together, it's like that thing on The Simpsons where it's like, Homer holds up the can and it's like nuts and gum together at last. It's some things, yeah, maybe not, but this worked together in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, I encourage you actually, if you haven't already, if you're a person watching this, go look up the Grim Fandango puzzle document, which is out there on the web. You can find it, which is like, hey, what does it look like, when you're starting a game, and also look up the Grim Fandango viewing list, which is it's like all the inspirations Grim Fandango. It was like films. We actually had like watch parties for these movies. Double Indemnity or The Carnival or,
Casablanca.
As it turns out.
It's so weird. Casablanca figures into this. Oh, it's so weird.
Who could imagine?
Right.
Anyway. But it's like we wore inspirations on our sleeves, but on the other hand, it was like, when you look at that stuff, it's very cohesive. And then also, like, if you're in the Bay Area, there's a few things you can go see that are pretty astonishing. In Oakland, California, if you go to the Paramount Theater, Art Deco theater, you always see Art Deco in black and white, and you don't realize that that's because the film was black and white, not because the environments are black and white. And they are just the most incredible colors and forms, just beautiful stuff. You can look at it online, the Paramount Theater in Oakland, but if you go see it in person, it really is astonishing. We went to a horse race track, to see what it was like to hear the announcers and like how are people moving around to the horse race track. I think it's instructive to go see like what are the inspirations for something that you like. They lead you into new scenes of things to enjoy, and maybe things to be inspired by. And I think there's a lot there in this game. There was good taste. Brought good ingredients.
Yes. No, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, well, Bret, I know we blew past 90 minutes. I really want to thank you. I can't speak well. I can't recommend this game to anybody enough. I can't say enough good things about it. This was such a great game that I have played and replayed and re-experienced, and I put it down and I come back a year later and I'll play back through. I mean, I play all the way through the game. I've got saves so that way I can just
Amazing.
Play year 3 or whatever I want to do. I want to walk around the bottom of the ocean with Glottis for a while, whatever that might be. But I always come back to it. So I do appreciate on the remastered that some of the achievements that you can get kind of in Steam and things like that. One of the achievements is that you have to play the entire game with the tank controls. and I was like, all right, I have been preparing for this for 20 years. So
you're rewarded for your dedication.
I played through the entire thing with tank controls. So,
amazing.
Yeah. But it's quite a bit of fun. But Bret, thank you so much for taking time.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been great to reminisce. And I think it was an interesting and wide-ranging conversation. Thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Buenos días. Everybody here is just as dead as you. That's why we call it the land of the dead.
Manny, what are you doing here?
I wanted to see how your trip was going, Angel. I am your travel agent, you know. I could have walked faster than this. Híjole, I'm gonna miss the poisoning.
Cut the yap. I want something cheap where I can get some rest, and that's it. If you haven't bagged a premium before the next sales report comes in, you're out!
Guess they couldn't save me, huh?
No, but there's still a chance you could save me. I was once a reaper like yourself, Manuel. But I uncovered a web of corruption in our beloved Department of Death.
Hector, no!
It looks like I've got one of your boys down here in the morgue.
Tell me, Manny, would I have had a chance?
You gotta watch your step around here, stranger. Rubicon ain't the quaint little port town she used to be.
I've got to get back to the city where the action is. Manuel, are you in love with her? Love? Love is for the living, Sal. I'm only after her for one reason. She's my ticket out of here.
I'm getting out of here. This world's for suckers.